All right. So I think what I'll do, I want to hear more of your questions and your struggles with the ministry that you're doing or hoping to do. But I want to give you an overview of a Muslim woman's life in the Middle East. And I want you to also understand that that transfers with them here. They don't leave everything behind just because they are in a much open or a much freer community. It still carries with them, and we have major signs of that in the West today. So let's start with how we were raised and how our view of ourselves was formed. Okay, to Muslim people, God is very important. So we are taught, we take religion class in all schools. So we are taught everything about Islam in schools, but also Muslim families teach their kids at home. I'm from a family that was an upper scale family, didn't really care much about, we were not fanatics. Yet I had an imam come every Friday and do Islamic lessons. I never really memorized the Quran because it just never made sense, and it's really difficult to memorize. But a lot of Muslim families raise their kids to memorize the Quran because it just weighs well in their balance or in the scale of their good deeds and all that. So there is a knowledge about Islam, and especially for women, they want you to be indoctrinated with who you should be, how you should act, what Allah expects from you. So we have this awareness very, very young in our life. My first experience with God was when I asked my grandmother, "Where is God?" So I asked my grandmother, "Where is God?" And grandma was my main source of information about everything. And as well educated as she was and open to the world and knew things in life, she was very closed-minded when it came to God and Islam. And she said that God is everywhere. So, and I was maybe 4 or something, and I said, "Can I touch him?" And she freaked out. You cannot touch God. You have to say, "I'm sorry, Lord, astaghfirullah al-azim." You have to ask for forgiveness and, don't talk about God that way. And from that point on, that put in my view that God is not to be touched, talked about, just lightly at least. And put a distance between me and God. But my experience is not really different than many of the Muslim women today. There was still that longing in me to know more of God. So I would ask questions, and we were always answered with, "You're a woman, you shouldn't be asking these questions. These are not beneficial for you. Don't ask, just receive it and do it." I grew up to understand later on that this concept is not just for women, by the way. This is the concept of Islam. You receive what you have given, what you've been given, and you just do it without asking question. It's just the obedience is obedience without thinking. Okay, there's no room to think. So the concept of God is very, very important to us. We want to know about him, but we're limited in how we know about him. But basically, what I have been taught came from the Quran about God. So God talks about himself as distant, as judgmental, because he's judging everything that we do, and as he speaks about women issues in the Quran, you could tell that he's very much pro-men. Women do not have much room to do much or to be much without a man's, control over their life. So I'm gonna go through the view of God about women, I'll just put like 2 or 3 points before you so you can see from my point of view how I thought God thought of me. So God in Islam says that women are below a man. So they're one step below, or a man is one step above. So instantly, I understood that I'm a second grade person. I am below somehow. It's not really explained to us why are we below, but it's collectively through our life we know that we are below. We're treated that way, and it just accumulates. Another thing in the Quran, which is the voice of God or the thoughts of God, there are some phrases that would come, or verses in the Quran that speaks of women very in a derogatory way. So in Surah 12, it's the story of Joseph. So supposedly, they made up this story. Potiphar's wife was accused that she loved Joseph, so she was embarrassed by that among the women and the people in the palace. So the story says that she invites women from all, from society at the time, and she has a party or something, and she gives every woman an apple or an orange or whatever it is, and give them very, very sharp knives. And suddenly she asks Joseph to come in. And because Joseph was amazingly beautiful, when he came in, the women, instead of cutting the apple or the orange, they cut their hands. So, and then the comment on the story is the comment of Allah himself. And he says, their evil or their wickedness or their cunning is great. So this phrase became, what do you call that? It became a label for every woman up to now. Through history, in the Arab world, or anybody that knows how to speak Arabic, they will talk about their wives or their sisters or even their mothers and say, oh, well, their wickedness and their cunning is great. So that label has been put on women by Allah himself. But the interesting thing, as I grew up to understand later on, why are the imams always talking about women as they're so evil like that? Because there's a verse in the Quran that talks about the wickedness and cunning of Satan himself. And it says that the wickedness and cunning of Satan is weak. So comparing to women, women are more cunning than Satan himself in the eyes of the Islamic community. And this is why women are a source of sin, women are a source of shame, and when they're dealt with, their husbands, their family, they always think that they have an agenda. So, honestly, I was growing up to think that I might have this ability in me, It's there somewhere. Also, the God of Quran talks about women anyway, there's a verse that talks about their ability to argue or make a statement or make a case for themselves. And the God of Quran says, you women are not really able to be to make an argument for yourself because your concern is all about the outer look. So you're concerned about your jewelry and how you look and all that. So instantly, I think I really must be very concerned about how I look because I'm taught to do that, by the way, because I have to look good for my husband. I have to look a certain way and act a certain way. And the deeper issue for me is that I can never make an argument and win it. Yesterday we talked about word curses. I think that curse was put on women from Satan himself through history, and we did not know how to deal with that. For the longest time, I thought I can never make an argument for myself. And then I learned that the freedom that Jesus gave me allowed me to just be honest and speak my heart and make an argument. And, and look at what I do today. It's a complete lie. But women in the Middle East feel like if that's the judgment of Allah himself who created her, that, should have some merit. But they're discovering something different now. So there are so many judgments that have been put on a Muslim woman by God himself, and then the authority related to God. Now, the authority that he gave to men over her is really profound, because Muslim women are not supposed to be outside of their house even without a guardian, a male guardian. So there is a verse in the Quran that says women stay at home. That is a judgment. You have to actually do that. And you don't really have room to argue that. So there was one of the prominent imam, his name is Sha'rawi. He was asked about a woman's right to work. And you have to understand, with the divorce rate around the Muslim world, it is a horrific thing. Some countries have, like Egypt, I think, has 65% divorce rate in newer marriages right now. It's horrendous. Women are being left to fend for themselves and to take care of their families and children without help. And a woman needs her education and needs to work. But Sha'rawi was asked about a woman's right to work, and he said, basically, why? What happened to the men of this country? Quran said women should stay at home, and they should. Back in his days, women didn't even go out of the house to take their bread to be baked in the bakery. They would put it outside the door, and any man in the street would come, take it to the bakery, and bring it back. So even in that, what he thought it was respect for women at that time, it was bondage, waiting for charity of someone to come by and bake her bread for her. But really, this is the view of what a woman should do. Because when a woman is released out of the house, Allah says that she will have the tendency to do what would not honor God. And basically what they mean is, be immoral and sexually open. And they think if a woman gets out of the house, she's going to do something like that. Because that's the purpose of her. So this view affects how I saw myself. Now, let's go to Muhammad as the prophet of Islam. Muhammad is the best example that men and women, Muslim men and women, should follow. So we're not only following his example or what he said or what he did, we're also following the example of his wives and daughters, because they're just the best people. Okay. So Muhammad was psychologically imbalanced, definitely. He was an orphan that his mother really didn't take care of him. So at a time where women took care of their children, and higher society, even women took care of their children, and people lived as tribes together, Muhammad's mother gave him up to someone to nurse him for 2 years. And then this woman brought him back, and the woman, his mother, said, no, take him back for 2 more years. And so he felt like he was rejected twice over by that mother. And you could see how he talked about her and how he dealt with women through his life. I think it stemmed from that. A lot of it stemmed from that. So a lot of his judgment had to do with his experience with women, whether it was his mother or some of his wives. Also, through his life, as he lived with people, the ones that really called him out on bigger things were women and Jews. And those two are the ones that he spoke against most. So Muhammad was shown hell, as he said once, and he said that most of the inhabitants of hell are women. So what happened here is that in Muhammad's time, it's not as you were told, as we were told, that women did not have a status in the community, and Islam elevated the status of women. It's actually the opposite. Muhammad's first wife, Khadija, was his elder by 15 years, and she chose him. He worked for her, and she wanted to marry him. At the time, Khadija owned 2/3 or 1/3, I think 1/3 of the economy of this town, Mecca. No one tells us that, but the history books said that. This woman had authority to actually be a tribal leader. At that time, women were able to politically help other people for asylum or something like that. So when tribes fight together, some people would want to seek refuge. So they can go to women leader in the community and seek refuge. I mean, I want you to compare between women that cannot get out of their homes today and women back before Muhammad that had a status like this. There are books, yes?
30 minutes.
Thank you. There are books, historical books that has listed women's name in before Muhammad's time up to 7 generations. Today, you cannot call a woman by her name in the street. If you ask a Muslim man, what's the name of your mother? He would say, shame on you, you can't ask me that. Your name became a shameful thing. Okay, my ex-husband used to stand in the street and call us from, to look from the balcony or something, and he would call my son's name. And my dad came to visit, and he's like, why is he calling your son's name? What's going on here? We don't understand that, right? So before Muhammad, women actually have a much better status, and they were leaders in their community. But then Muhammad, when he said that hell story, I think that was a very significant story. He was passing by the market, and he saw the women in the market working. Where were the men? Probably sitting somewhere having a drink or something. I mean, seriously, that's what they did. It's not a joke. They would sit and drink and eat and all that. But the women were working in the market. And Muhammad looked at them, and I felt like he was angry. And he said, be aware, I was shown the inhabitant of hell, and most of it was women. So you be careful, because you're going to hell. And then they asked him, why are you saying that? What are we doing wrong? And he said, because you are not good to your husbands. I mean, basically, what it means. You need to be good to your husband because you make your husbands angry. And then shortly after, he ordered women to stay at home. He wanted them out of the community because they asked questions that challenged him. And up to today, women ask questions that challenge Muslim leaders. Okay, so we were very affected by that. What he thinks of a woman affects us. Also, his life affected women through generations for hundreds of years in many different ways. Child marriage, who started that and who made it a law today that Muslim countries cannot put an age on marriage for girls by law, and they argue that in parliaments because Muhammad married his wife when she was 6, consummated when she was 9, and al-Mufti, or the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, he said, you can actually have a contract of marriage with a girl that is an infant baby. You can. Okay? They cannot break the law that he started. And because of that, hundreds of thousands and millions of young girls were killed or abused or had a messed up life. How does that affect their life today? It still happens. It still happens. Many stories of girls that have been married at 6, 9, 8. Look at Yemen, Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in the villages of Egypt. Horror stories, okay? And it still goes on because he said so. Now, Allah and Muhammad, also another point is that Muhammad affected women's life when he abolished adoption, because he lusted over his son's wife. So through history, now for 1400 years, how many kids could not find homes? How many mothers would have longed to have to adopt a child and give him a home and couldn't do that? And still in the Arab countries, it's illegal to adopt. Okay, so put those together, and the judgments that came out of Quran and Muhammad's life led to women being controlled by their fathers, and they go from their father's house to the control of their husband. There is an important hadith, or I'm going to actually recite 2 for you. When I married my ex-husband, my mother-in-law sat with me and she had an advice for me. Her advice was a hadith, a saying from Muhammad, and she said that the Prophet said that if a woman says no to her husband, that the angels will sit through the night and curse her all night. Now imagine that you are a Muslim woman and you have all this judgment over your head, and on top of that, you're really looking at your scale and know there is no way you can top that scale. And on top of that, you'll have a couple angels sitting cursing you all night because you said no to your husband because you're tired, and it means the sexual part. So it was her duty to let me know that. That's what we learned. Okay. The other hadith that affects many of women today, and with the freedom that you see around the world, don't think that these things does not happen on the ground in the Muslim world. What's the hadith? Sorry. Okay. So there is a concept of that all parts of a woman is shameful to be shown. The word I don't think has a translation. Help me, Hani and Mervid, if you have a translation for awra. Yeah, I tried. It's shameful to show. It's a sin to show. So basically, so your hair is awra. It has to be covered. Your hand, your face, your legs, or whatever. Okay. So the hadith talks about that a woman has 10 awras or 10 shameful things about her or about her life. 9 of them her husband would cover because he will make her wear the hijab, he will make her act appropriately, he will put her at home. I mean, it's his responsibility to make sure that she behaves. And then the rest, the last one, only the grave will cover. So you are always walking around with this sense of heaviness and guilt and judgment over you, okay? But after that, the family and the husband and everybody has that control, you're also looking around. And remember yesterday I talked to you about the concept of watching each other, being watchers over each other. In a Muslim woman's life, that is very true, because even family members watch each other. So if she does not behave, she has the judgment of the community. She will be marked by the community. So you can be marked as a divorced woman. You can be marked as the woman that does not obey her husband. You can be marked as the one that is not veiled or not following the Islamic teaching, or disobedient to your father or something like that. These things are very shameful because the Islamic communities are very close to each other. Or you could be marked as the one that maybe had an immoral failure or something like that, which is really, really big. And you'll be an outsider right away, or in many cases, you'll be killed. In Pakistan and in Afghanistan, you see the stories of these girls that burned themselves or killed themselves. It's because it's better than what he's doing to her. She probably was married at 4 years old, being abused at 4 years old, and then by the age of 12, she can't handle it anymore, you know? So, now, I'm gonna take 5 minutes, because I really wanna hear your questions and answer it, to give you an overview about West versus East, okay? All what I said about women and how they view themselves and the product of that, the end result, how am I gonna view myself concerning to God when this is all going on in my life? First of all, the only answer and the only solution to that is to meet Jesus, because he certainly was my healing, and he continues to heal that in me every day. And he does that in the Muslim world, in Saudi Arabia. Guys, there are people, there's that girl, 19 years old, Zainab, called my show. She had just accepted Christ with my co-host on the phone 1 month before that. And live on TV, she says, I live in Saudi Arabia and I am free. I said, even when you're living in Saudi Arabia? She said, yeah, it's all worth it. Even if it's one day in Christ, it's all worth it. 19. You know, she might not live another week, but she's got Jesus. That's the only healing, okay? So, women come to the West and carry that with them, whether they were coming with their families, that some of these things are going to be applied to them, even though they have freedom to go to college or work or something. I've met many wives here that are doctors, or I'm in the States, but doctors, and she goes home after she have worked all day and has to perform the same things and be beaten by her husband and treated miserably, and she can't talk about it. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's ingrained in her until someone, you know, brings a different level of understanding in her life to help her out through that. But I also want you to understand that some of the atrocities of Islam carries out here too. We talked about young girls' marriage, or, you know, child brides. You know that this happens here in the West. I had a young woman on my show. She was brought to the States at age 11, consummated her marriage to her husband at age 11, and she told her story. She said she was screaming to the top of her lung as he's tearing up her body in the United States. She had, I think, 13 abortions or something like that. It's just a horrendous thing. By the time I met her, I think she was 27, if I remember right, or something like that. She had had 37 surgeries from the face, from the neck up, because of what he did to her. I took her to Disneyland with her son that was 13 or something, 14. And as she was walking in front of me, she was wearing shorts and walking with my daughter and her son. And I thought, she's just as a baby as they are. And I looked at her legs. Her legs are cut with a knife all over. This happens here. Recently, there was a story in the paper about a Dearborn doctor that is practicing female genital mutilation here. I've been saying this for 15 years. It's happening here. Pay attention. But praise God, it's coming out. So, not because they're in the West, their stories and their life does not carry here. It does. But you have the hope of Christ in you that can change that and give them hope in the midst of this darkness. Many of them will come to Christ and be killed here. I lived on the run for 10 years in the States. I was in hiding for 10 years with my kids in the States. So be aware of that and know that their situation it doesn't make sense to your life and mind and way of thinking, but it's very real for them. I want to take your questions. Go ahead. Yes?
I'm just wondering, back where you were from, if a woman didn't get married, what happens to her then? If she absolutely refused to get married, what happens then?
I think society doesn't really accept that, but you know, in Egypt, women are able to be educated and they can support themselves. It's very difficult, and there are so many judgments against her. But I've known many women that can choose to be that way. Actually, there is a story about Muhammad himself back then, because he made the marriage story for a Muslim woman very horrifying. He said very disgusting things about what a woman should be able to do for her husband, and not complain, because if he would ask someone to worship someone, a woman should worship her husband. So a woman came to him and she said, "What's the rights of my husband?" And he gave her some very disgusting details of what she should be doing. And she said, "Thank you very much. I will not be marrying. I just wanted to know." She was making a statement. Yeah, so that still happens today. So they can. Yes.
Isn't that true, because these women are part of Islam, that they totally accept their sufferings and their beating because this is going to give them a higher status with Allah? So they accept it. They don't even want to be out of that because that makes them worthy before Allah.
Well, partially. I think they want to be out of that. So they accept it because it's a judgment of Allah, because we were told that anything that comes to you, Allah has already decided. You are predestined to all that, and that this will make if they're not deserving of that beating, then that will make their scale lighter at the end. But it's an indoctrination. We were raised to think that this is okay. I personally lived in a different family. I don't think beating is okay. But I didn't live with my father. He never hit me or beat me or anything like that, but he did hit his wife. Okay, there was a story on TV. One very famous TV show host in the Middle East was talking about a story. A man hit a woman in the market somewhere, and this girl took him to court. But she came against her, and she said, "Well, you cussed him out, so you deserve what's coming to you." So the other host was saying, "You're okay with a man beating a woman?" And she said, "Well, depends on what she did. She must have deserved it." So the woman went further. "Are you okay with someone hitting you?" "Well, depends." It became okay because Allah said in Quran. Yes.
You know, I always think in every culture there are good people, or I've always wondered why the men, like I'll say the good men, or the men that are somewhat somewhat against the Quran, saying, you know what, this is my wife and these are my daughters. Like, does that ever happen?
Yes, it does happen. First, I want to comment on the concept of good. I don't really think that there is good men or good women. I think in a general concept, we are a fallen nature, and I think we introduce deception when we talk about good men and women. Okay, you have to understand what they have been raised to know is right will always be right. So if you, I use that example a lot on my show. If I get a pineapple and put it on the table for my children and say, this is caviar. My kids are gonna eat pineapple every day and think it's caviar. It's what they're taught. It's caviar to them. Introduce the real caviar to them. They'll say you're a liar. No, it doesn't taste like that. No, okay? But yes, there are men and women that love their wife or their husband or their kids and not beat their kids. And to that I say they are better than their God.
I'm really interested in knowing what it's like for women raised this way when they come to North America and they look out on our culture and see the freedoms that women have. And like, does it change their thinking very quickly? Or do they stay embedded in it? Are they, like, even apart from Christianity, just all the freedoms that are part of our way of living?
Yeah, well, we're taught that freedom is not a good thing. And your freedoms are what we know about the West, that you're all immoral, you sleep around, you don't have any values or all of that. So that's their first impression. So when they come in, they're shocked because they see that you do have family values. You're not all walking around naked, and you're not all sleeping around, and not all the men wants to sleep with them, and they get really shocked about that. Now, there are two approaches, I think. Some of them will want to take the approach of, I'm better than you because I'm covered and you're not. And then they get to see, after a while, they get to deal with you and see that, oh, there's something called the heart and intention, and it's different, and they appreciate that. And some of them are really longing to the freedoms you have. So when you invite them to your homes, and when they see that your husband is standing next to you, washing the dishes, helping, serving them, today is a day that, you're gathering the women and the husbands are serving. This shocks them, and they'll start asking questions. So don't be afraid to talk to them about what made you the way you are.
Good news, kitchen has delayed lunch, so you have until 5 to 12. You have more time.
Oh, praise the Lord. All right. I hope that it is for you. Can I just take her question first? Yes.
Well, I was just thinking of when someone asked Jesus a question, and he called him good teacher, and Jesus said, there's no one good but God. And that kind of was part of the question that she asked about good people. Yes. Anyway, I just wanted to know, like, what do you say to people? What do you say to women who are propagating the kinds of things that that you're fighting against? Like they either in other countries or they come to this country, and we're talking about female genital mutilation, which it is the woman who takes the child to have this operation done. Or, there's a lot of other things too that are propagated against women, and it's the woman herself who is the one that is, passing these things on to her daughter. How do you deal with those?
The question is, why is the woman doing that? Mm-hmm. So, not all the women are doing that voluntarily. So the man controls that for sure. But some of the women actually do that because, it's a culture of shame and honor. So if she does not do that to her daughter, their understanding, if they don't cut off that part of her body, she's just gonna run around and sleep around, you know. I've done shows on this and interviews with people that actually literally said that. If you don't do that, she's gonna sleep around, you know. So you have to change their understanding of how God built them. You know, they're not always open to that, and also, like for an example, that circumcision thing is just too long of a word. Some of the Christian families in Egypt do that because it's a shame and honor culture. You know, and yeah, because well, everybody else in the city does that, and this is where the community part of the impact on a woman's life come in. It impacts it in that way. Whatever the community will see, what are the people going to say? Because the women will come and ask her, so when are you going to circumcise your daughter? When are you going to do that? You know, so
influence.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Peer pressure.
I find the men very uninvolved with their families. How to encourage like that, because it's all on the women's shoulders?
Yeah, don't encourage it. Let them be separated a bit, because it's a lighter weight on the woman. No, I mean, I don't mean it in that way. Men are very uninvolved because the role of a man and a role of a woman in the Middle East or in the Islamic culture is just defined as that. You see the man leading ahead and the woman carrying everything and taking the children. They're all on top of her. They're just really not involved with their responsibilities as father. But when they get involved, sometimes it's dangerous. So you have to do it a case at the time. So if there is a kind man that wants to learn to help with his kids or something like that, and you don't see the wife complaining about him beating her, interfering, or making her life miserable, yeah, encourage them and give them tools, examples of how to do that. But if a man is mean, yeah, let her deal with it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. In Islam, they accept Jesus as a prophet. Mary washed the feet of Jesus with her hair. She did not wear a burqa. You could share this with the Muslim women, the freedom we have in Christ.
Yeah.
They didn't have to have their head covered. Like she washed his feet with her hair.
Yeah.
They accepted it. He didn't rebuke her. They
Yeah.
accepted Jesus as a prophet. You know, just share the Bible stories.
Yeah, I don't really like to separate and say accept Jesus as a prophet, because they already do.
Yeah,
Okay, so they think Jesus is a prophet.
Yeah.
But
He's more than a prophet.
of course you can tell the story, but tell the story as it is in the Bible.
Yes.
But when you're telling a story like this, that Mary washed the feet of Jesus with her hair, the first time I heard the story, I thought, oh, that's kind of like culturally, that's not, not good. So you have to ask the Holy Spirit to lead you in which stories you share. But here, in something specifically like that, you are facing commands by the Quran and Muhammad. Whatever came before doesn't really matter to them. They have to do what he said. And the Quran says that women should be covered. But it doesn't tell them, exactly why. Okay, can I take your question?
This might be personal. So your parents, what was their stand on circumcision and mutilation?
Yeah, no, we did not have any of that in our family, praise God. I think it has to do with education. My grandmother was very well educated. Hani and Merbet knew her very well. She was a lot of fun. She was a lawyer and a very open-minded and fun person, but I know Dr. Hani tried to share the gospel with her multitudes of times, and she probably cussed him out a couple times. But praise God, she accepted the Lord. But I think it's a level of education. She was well educated. She knew what she should and shouldn't do. And it's an optional thing. Actually, people do that because they want to be closer to whatever Muhammad says. It makes them, closer to heaven, or a bit less torture at the end.
That's not in the Quran, right?
No, it's a saying of Muhammad. It was actually a practice that happened before he came. So a woman asked him, this is my job. I do this, the circumcision to girls. And he said, okay, do it, but don't take off much. Sorry. But so they have to do. It's just, they have to follow. I think it was her. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, when you have situations of like abuse and stuff, is there anything practical as well that you can do, like in those situations? It's probably a case-by-case basis.
It is a case-by-case basis, but I do have an opinion on that and an experience in that. I think you here in Canada, we are in America, we have a law that guides us. So if you see anybody endangered and you can do something about it, you have to, abide by the law. So if you're a teacher or and one of the students say that he wants to commit suicide, what would you do?
Talk to the suicide counselor. But so for me, my husband and I are planning on going overseas.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm thinking more like here. I would abide by the laws of Canada. I would do my best to intervene because there are people that can help with that.
Right.
But in a different situation, so I've been to North India as well, and when I was 19, and there was a situation that wasn't it wasn't abuse at that point, but I just remember hearing my friends say oh, but we just have to accept it, and I was very shocked and kind of had a conversation. But
well, I don't think
at the same time, but I guess for me going overseas, what can I do?
Okay. Well, let me tell you my experience in that. I want to finish the thought about the law. I think we do need to use any tools that the law gives us, but we also need to be very aware of the cultural differences and what's acceptable in their culture and what's dangerous here. And if there are kids involved and all that. So you really have to be sensitive to that. Had I met Aya, the girl that I told you the story about years ago, and I saw what was happening in her life, I would call the police myself and go right with them, definitely. So these things are, you don't have to think twice about it. But if you go and, maybe you see him hit her or something, or slap her or something like that, you have to take a stand and saying, hey, that's not how we do things here, and just assess your situation. But also encourage the woman herself to not so much stand up for yourself, this is not how you should be treated. Talk to her about how God views her. And pray with her. This is an opportunity to pray with her. I loved the question to Joy yesterday because she answered that yesterday about abuse, and I was really encouraged that Joy encouraged everyone to not tell them separate, because we want families to stay together. If you reach the woman, you're gonna reach the family. It's the opposite. People used to say, you reach the man, you reach the family. No, if you reach the woman, you're going to reach the family. So encourage them to stay. Now, when you're abroad, you're going to have to completely depend on the Holy Spirit. Because, of course, they have more freedom to do that openly in the streets. But you can say something. You can stand and pray and say, no, this is not good. And personally with women, some women call me and say, he abuses me, he does this or he does that. First thing I say is that is not what God wants for you. But here's how we can move on. I hope that's helpful. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, so I just and I guess if you are into a case of really tough abuse, there's a part of me I guess from my Canadian background, I'm thinking that knows that in the past, the church itself tended to tell women who were being abused that they should save their husband and hope God will change them or something. And it was very anti-divorce as well. And I think the church here has come a long way since of saying, no, like that's not okay if you need to divorce because there's consistent abuse going on. So I guess I wonder what the line is, and I know there may not be as much freedom in other countries, and it may be very difficult practically too.
I think I would deal with a believer differently than if she wasn't a believer. With a believer, I would definitely take a different approach if there is no hope. But I'm going to tell you a story about that. A woman called me and she said that she had just accepted or wanted to accept Christ, and she did not really like her husband at all. He abused her, he oppressed her, he pressured her, so she wanted to leave him. And after we spent about an hour talking, and she accepted Christ, and then I said, we'll take a different approach now. Start praying. Pray for your husband. She called me within a month, and she was ready to leave her 2 children and her husband and just go off on her own. And in 1 month, she called me and she said, he completely changed. I pray for him every day. I fast for him every day. She said, I make his lunch every day while I'm fasting and tell the Lord, God, I will go hungry for him to know the bread of life.
Oh, wow.
2 months. Yeah. God can make that change.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it true that they're allowed to divorce their wife just for no reason, like they have to just speak it 4 times?
You can send a text and it would go too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the big issue of divorce, is if the husband's choosing to walk
Yes,
away?
but again, let's look deeper. The enemy made it so easy to say, I divorce you and you're divorced. So the enemy gave them that tool, and now the value of a relationship and marriage is gone. A wife is for sexual pleasure. There is an imam that gave a fatwa about marrying a Christian woman, because they're allowed to marry the Christian women. And he said, you cannot love her because it's haram, it's forbidden. You can't love the infidels or have alliances with the Christian people. Okay, so you can't love her. When you get in the house, you don't greet her. She gets up for you, but you don't greet her. And then the audiences asked, well, how do you sleep with her if you don't love her? And he said, so if a man rapes a woman, does he have to love her to rape her? Yasser Burhami, very prominent. Is that his opinion? No. It's Muhammad.
So this is quite a common issue. Many now can't take second wives here, or maybe they're doing it secretly, I don't know.
Yeah, they are doing it secretly.
Yeah, but still the whole issue is how to encourage them to stay in their marriages faithfully. But maybe, a lot of them practice
polygamy?
Prostitution, or just, do they go elsewhere and take women? Is that
the men?
common? Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a big topic, and they do this in the West. They'll do it in a different way because all the infidels are kind of free. So there are many issues about that. But polygamy itself is just another sign of how Satan kind of broke the relationship and is breaking down the family. It's a big issue in the Middle East now. There are many people against it, and they're speaking against it, and especially women. They're taking an incredible stand against that, and they're bringing the truth of what's happening in their within their families and their life, and trying to change the laws of their countries. So there is hope. Yeah.
So can you speak to them about the message? A lot of them, do they actually grasp?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of shows on polygamy and why not, and God's view. Also, when, I mean, the other side of that is that this is a family. So what do you do when a believer comes with 4 wives that are all believers? What do you do? I guess you guys can answer that question. But I think we're probably ready for lunch. All right, let's pray.